Did you know that in you there is the next Elon Musk? There is the next Bill Gates? There is the next Jeff Bezos? There is the next Michelengo? All the great people that have gone or come before us. There is one in you. Robert Kiyosaki termed this idea rich daddy, poor daddy. He choreographed a conversation from a poor daddy as well as from a rich daddy. But what he's saying is we are all the same. And this is true through science, it's true through scriptural teachings, that we are all the same. Regardless of the colors of the skin we carry or express, regardless of the status of a social order that we occupy at any single moment of our life, regardless of the challenges we face, the place and space we live in the world, regardless of all of that, the truth remains, we are the same. And you ask me, how can a poor man have the same capacity as a person like Jeff Bezos? You know, before Jeff Bezos became Jeff Bezos, he didn't have that much money. He wasn't a poor person. He had the capacity in him and he exercised it. In fact, I read a story the other day where a gentleman was referring, whether I'm assuming they were colleagues, friends, or however, there was a relationship between him and Jeff Bezos while he was still working as a banker or at the bank. And he said when Jeff Bezos quit his job, this is what he was informed by Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos told him, I want you to invest on what I'm going to start. I'm going to build a website where I'm going to sell books online. And I will pack these books in my garage and mail it to each and every person who buys. But this is the kicker. This company will generate over $100 billion and I will be the richest man in the world. What a dream. According to the gentleman, and again, I'm just quoting here. The gentleman said, at that time, the United States debt was nowhere close to $100 billion. Actually, $100 billion was unheard before that. Yes, the GDP could have been, but it wasn't a common number spoken in a common circles as it is today. But here is the man who understood his capacity and spoke his destiny. And you're going to ask me, how is that going to make that person equal to a person who is poor on the other side of the world? It's simple. Science today informs us that in each and every one of us, there are billions of neurons. Neurons are simply threads that carries information. If you talk about wires, think of a wire. It's a thread that carries information. And then that information, in order to be transferred from one place to another, there have to be a connector. When wires are transmitted electricity, like for instance, if you pay attention to electrical wire that are running up and down, when the wire comes to a pole, there's a break, meaning that wire breaks and then there's a connection that connects that wire and another wire that takes that electricity to another pole. And there's continuous of these connections all over the place. If one day you've ever had a chance to look at electricity in your home or in your apartment, you will see these connections where one wire comes in and is connected to another wire. When a wire comes from the main source of electricity, which is your circuit breaker in your house, it will run all the way to a socket, whether it's a light socket or a plug-in. There will be a connection. And so it is, neurons are those wires. They carry information, electrical information from point A to point B. But in order for information to transmitted to another neurons, in between their connections, they call synapses. And these are just connecting one circuit, which one neuron to another, in order for the information to continue to pass through our body and cause us to act according to the information we received. So we have about 1 billion of those neurons in our body. All of us. No one have more neurons than the other. And those neurons are the carriers of information. And then we have the synapses. They said there are about trillions of those in our mind, in the brain. So all of us have the same amount of neurons as well as the same amount of synapses, the connections, the connectors. The difference is the efficiency of the neurons and the synapses. Some have greater efficiency in communicating particular information, while others have greater efficiency of communicating a particular information. So it's all about information. What information do you have? And how often do you visit that information? Or you have made that information your gospel, the good news, or the news that you continuously consume in your mind. And the more you focus or consume that information, you increase the efficiency of that information being transmitted in your brain. And therefore, your reaction to life consistent with information received or communicated. That being the case, or that being said, a poor person have been bombarded by information about poverty, how life hard it is. They have paid attention to their circumstances, and the circumstances have said, look at shit living you have. They've looked at their maybe stove, and they look and there was no food to cook every day. They've looked at their cupboard maybe, or pantries as you would call it, and there's now not enough food to eat. And out of that observation, they've concluded that life is difficult. It is impossible. It is harder. And that becomes the information that continuously be part of their mind. And therefore, the neurons that carry that information and synapses that connect that information to their ability to think, to behave, guess what? That information, that transmission become more efficient. And if a person comes and say, guess what, my friend? You can be successful. You can be wealthy. You are the next Van Gogh. You are the next Jeff Bezos. You are the next Bill Gates. You are the next Warren Buffett. They will curse you out. And guess what? They start believing or inclined to hear information that makes them feel sad, information that are consistent with their troubles. And because that's the only information they are exposed to themselves, they become incapable of become any successful than that which they're experiencing in life. And that is true for you. You might not be that poor person in the village, struggling in the welfare system, constantly seeking help. You might not be that person. But you might be a different person who doesn't have enough to meet their obligations, to meet their financial needs in the way that you would like to. You have to figure it out all the time. Which bills can you pay and which one you cannot? Or late fees are something that visits you more frequently than you would have liked to. Your credit cards are maxed, like mine at some point. I maxed everything. And I couldn't get enough. In order to survive, I needed more debt because I couldn't meet my obligations efficiently. But then I apply the very simple secret, this very simple principle Jeff Bezos applied. The very simple principle Bill Gates applied. The very simple principle Warren Buffett applies every day. A very simple principle Elon Musk always applies. Van Gogh applied. Michelangelo applied, and all the great artists of the world, those who have gone before us and those who are still entertaining us today, are applying the same principle. It is not what they do. If you pay attention to what I said earlier, it's not about what they do. It's about what they consume as information in the area of their finances. I will give you a very simple example, and that's what makes us different. Each of us have a way of processing information more efficient in one area than the other. Me and my wife were having a conversation the other day. We were watching a movie of Ben Affleck. I forgot the name of the movie. It was a decent movie, but I forgot the name of it. And she brought it and said, "Oh, isn't that the guy who was married to J-Lo?" I said, "What do you mean he was married?" And I'm assuming they're still married. And she said, "No, they are not. I think they're divorced." I said, "Wow, I don't pay attention to entertainment news, not because there's anything wrong with it. I'm too much focused on building myself and create impact in the area of my interest." So artists, I get entertained by movies, but that's as far as I go. I watch the movies, I watch comedy, I watch all of that, and I'm excited. And that's how I relax myself sometimes, apart from my meditation, running, and other things. So in that case, I said, "Oh, you know what? I didn't know they were divorced." He said, "Yeah, they are." She said, "Yeah, they're divorced." I said, "Oh, that's interesting." I said, "Man, what is it, a 4th, 5th, 7th marriage that J-Lo has been?" And she said, "I don't know. It seems like it's a consistent thing for her. She's very good at divorcing people, but also very good of keeping herself to where she wants to be." And I said, "Oh, that's very interesting." But that's the key. She have consumed information and came to this understanding, this is who she is. Not that I doubt that she want to have this relationship and divorce people, because I don't know if she want to portray that image to her children. Maybe that's what her mission, but I doubt it. But because of the information she has consumed, she has become efficient of processing a particular information that makes it easier for her to go through a divorce, to break up, than to sustain a relationship. It is probably because she was hurt at some point. And anytime there's a problem, that's a way for her to protect herself from reoccurring of the hurt, because she has not dealt with the hurt psychologically. And because that memory, that synapse, that neurons that transmit that information about hurt is still as efficient and active today. So she's quickly to process information in that direction or that manner, and therefore her reaction becomes easily inconsistent to that. And if I have to protect myself, I have to walk away from this relationship, and therefore she will easily and quickly walk away from that relationship. Contrary, me and my wife have been married for 26 years. We've gone through some hardship. In fact, at some point I went to prison. And I was in prison for many years, about 9 years. But we had agreed when we were getting married that this is for good. I am not looking for a way out. It doesn't matter the circumstances we are facing. It doesn't matter the challenge. This is it. We made that decision. I made the decision. She made the decision. We didn't make it together, but we individually made that. And because of that decisions, over the years before that incident happened, guess what? We had developed these neurons very sufficient, very efficient in making decisions that will favor to sustenance of our marriage. So when I was gone, she did everything that came against that situation, against our marriage, she was able to process in favor of, because the neurons and synapses that carries that information is very active and efficient in a way of communicating, versus the neurons that will cause a decision to break away from that relationship. And therefore, she sustained the relationship. And today, we are more in love than we've ever been before. Actually, I would say every time I see her, the way I feel about my love for her is greater than the one I felt the first time when we met. And that's a fact. But it's because we made a choice to develop and enhance the neurons that we all have, but we in that area have developed. And over a period of time, past time, I had a business that grew so much. Under that circumstances in my past, the business grew, generated significant amount of money. And in that period of time when that business grew, actually I developed, not to the great extent, a neurons that favored my decisions in supporting the business. So I made all the right decisions because the neurons was carrying the information, and it was all the information was carried forward. It caused my brain to process that information in favor So all my decisions, all my actions were bringing more businesses to a point that business generated almost, a little bit over $1 million in revenue, which was significant. That's 2008, 2007, 2006, 2005. That was a lot of money for me, who had never seen that much money. I came from middle income family in East Africa, Tanzania. So I wasn't even born in the United States, coming from that world where my family was not rich at all. We lived day by day, struggled the way we can. My parents provided for us, but it wasn't more than enough. It was sufficient, just enough to get the day by. And I am proud for what they've done, because they too grew up in a village. They were farmers' children. My dad worked in a tea farm after school hours and all of that stuff. So for him to be able to move from being a kid of a farmer who worked in a farm barefooted, to go to school barefooted, and come and build a life in a city where he wore shoes every day, he drove cars, he traveled the world, and provided a roof over our head with a brick walls. And we had maids. So that was a great accomplishment. And my mom is the same way. She grew up in a village. Her dad was a merchant. She worked at the store her dad owned. But from that life, she came to the city, educated herself, and became somebody. It was a great success. She had her own job, she taught, she had a master's degree over the years, and she raised 4 children independently. And that was a great success. So I cannot knock off their success. But was it enough? No, it wasn't more than enough. It was sufficient. So I came to the United States, I started a business, and I was able to take that business, me and my wife, we took it from zero to over $1 million in revenue. That was a great success. But in the midst of that, that means we were making decisions that were favoring us. The news about recession started coming in. And people everywhere were talking about how life is difficult. The recession is hitting. Things are getting worse every day. And yes, things were getting worse in our eyes. Guess what? I came from worse that I was able to build. So it's not the worst that breaks people. It's the belief of the worst that breaks people. Because then I started developing appetite of consuming information about things are getting worse. And I consumed so much of that information. I messed up on opportunities. My decisions became poorly made. I acted in a way that was inconsistent with what I would have done before. I started investing in places that I could not have invested. I grew that business without advertisement. It was only the quality of service we provided that made people refer their friends. They would bring friends, and friends would bring friends. And all of a sudden, because I was afraid, I started buying ads out of fear. There's nothing wrong about buying advertisement. But under what decision are you buying it? Are you acting it out of abundance, or are you acting it out of fear that you might not have enough? And for me, I started advertising because I was afraid of the recession. Things are getting worse. And my business started seeing a slowdown of customers, clients. And we started engaging in financial creativity in order to help those few we have, because more of the difficult clients start coming to our ways. Until most of our business was done through prime lending, which was not what I wanted in life. I mean, I didn't want to keep funding prime lend customers because they're a little bit complicated to process. It requires more time. You need to shop around. Well, you know, if you had what we call a prime client at those times, it's easy. There's plenty of lenders who can give you that, give you financing for those type of deals. So eventually that business deteriorated, because I was consuming information about fear. And I started losing money. People were scamming me blindly. I was investing in places I shouldn't. I was making decisions that were very poor. And money kept going out of my pocket to a point where I couldn't afford to live in a place I was living before. I had about 11,000 square footage, 3.5 acres in a beautiful neighborhood. I mean, everything was beautiful. I had my wife had a car, I have mine, and so we were just doing extremely well. We were not extravagance in terms of our spending, but we spend within our limit based on the resources were coming. When the resources were no longer coming in that level, guess what? Those things became a burden to us. I remember the first thing that we had to let go was my car. I'm a guy who loves to have budget. So I was budgeting, I was tracking our finances. And when things got tough, the first thing is I had a Mercedes-Benz S500. And my wife had I can't remember whether it was a Volvo XC90, or it was a Acura at that time. I couldn't remember, but it was a truck because she needed 3-row seating because of kids' sports, and sometimes we have to help other parents to carry the kids to sports, and other parents sometimes will help us. So she made the decision to have a car. She didn't like minivans, so she preferred that type of a car better. And she didn't like bigger trucks, so that type of Acura, I believe, MDX or Volvo XC90 was ideal at the time. But anyway, when things got tough, it was obvious, and all of these cars were paid off. So the first thing to boost up our income, I said, maybe it's just a hump. We need to kind of break through this. I went to my bank and I said, I have these titles like free and clear. Can you give me a loan against this? First, they gave us a line of credit, no doubt. And then we maxed that line of credit. I'm like, they cannot increase the line of credit again. So I went again and took my cars, and they gave me a loan against those cars. Now the cars were paid off. Now we had to put a loan against. And that money too ran out. And I couldn't afford to pay the loans against those cars. I couldn't afford to pay the loans against the line of credit we had because things were not coming as they were before. So the next thing I called the bank. I said, listen, I cannot keep paying this loan for the car anymore. What's the best way? They said, okay, we can rearrange the deal for you so that you can afford and maybe be able to pay little by little. They rearranged the first time or restructured the deal, the financing, and things still didn't pan out the way I wanted. And eventually I called, I said, I've been missing my payment. So what can we do? They said, we have to repossess the car. I said, you don't need to come and repossess. You don't need to chase me anywhere. You have been a great banker to me. And I just want to have a peace of mind. I'm going to pull the car on my driveway. I'll leave the key inside and I'll take everything all the stuff, I'll clean it up. You guys can come and pick it up. And just like that, the car was repossessed. It was a peaceful repossession, but it was repossessed still. And things got tougher. We had to evacuate. We had to leave the house. The house went to foreclosure. We lost the house as well. It was a painful experience. I had to move in with my cousin. She was gracious. Her and her husband were gracious enough to welcome us in. It was the most embarrassing moment in my life. But because for a period of time, I consumed information of things are getting worse. The economy, the recession, so everything we gave a blame to something else. And as a result of that, we experience life in that manner to a point where we are bare minimum. Even when I was living with my cousin, and when I closed my business because I could not sustain it anymore, I started doing consulting. I studied management information systems, so it was easier to get into a consulting as a business analyst. And I was making decent money, about $10,000 a month, but I don't know what happened. I swear I cannot really attest to how the money was disappearing. We weren't spending anything fancy, but suddenly there were problems in every way. If there is not a car, it was this. If it wasn't this, it was that. If it wasn't that, it was there. Money just were drained out of our bank for unwarranted reasons. But at that time, I had fell so low to a point where all I knew was life is hard. Money is difficult. Money cannot stay with me. This money is not for me. I went back and I started looking at my life from childhood, and I could see that there was not plenty of money in my family. And I started resembling and identifying myself in that manner. That's how low I became. So my neurons that carries that information became more efficient. Under that state of mind, there's no way I could have been wealthy. There's no way I could have been successful financially. We never lost focus in our marriage. We felt confident about our marriage and our love, and the need for us as a family to stay together for the sake of us, our mental health in terms of marriage, and our children, most important. So that we did very well because the neurons that pass that information was very efficient, and the synapses that connects and transmit those information to one another helped us to make decisions that continued further our marriage. But our finances, because of what became a reality at the time, eroded us, caused us to make decisions that were not favorable. We put our money where we shouldn't have placed it in. We invest in things that we were losing instead of gaining. But all of that was a result or a product of something simple. Information we consumed and how they were transmitted in our brain in order to cause us to behave in a manner that is consistent with that information. And that's the key. It's the information that it's boiled to. A wealthy person consumes a particular type of information that favors them to make decisions that afford or give them the ability to do things in a way that is different than a poor person. A person who is struggling financially, it's not because there's no money for that person to earn. There's not opportunity for that person to explore and benefit. It's simply because those opportunities, despite of their existence, can never be perceived by that individual, provided that individual have not changed the type of information they consume. And in the beginning, when you start consuming information that favors you, it will be difficult. In fact, you will feel challenged, not because the information is challenging, is because the information is transmitted through different type of neurons than the ones you transmitted the information that put you in a place or position you are today. It's simple. It's simple about transmission of information and how that transmission of information affect the decisions we make and actions we take in order to support what the information we consumed says about us. And in fact, it is that information create what we call our identity. So today you are who you are primarily because of the regular information you consumed. You might watch this video and you might find it fascinating, but you might not take any actions that will lead you to changing your life. Simply because it's not in your nature. It's not in you. Not because the information is bad or is not articulative enough, it's just because it's not in your nature. While another person will watch this video who have developed the mental capacity to process information of progress, of prosperity, differently. And because that person have consumed or have developed that neuron, they will make decision or act on this information in a way that it will favor them. And in a short period of time, their lives will change from where they are today to something greater tomorrow. But just because you are used to it to consume a particular information, it does not mean you cannot change. When Jeff Bezos made that statement that I am going to be the richest man in the world, this company that I'm going to start in my garage, where I'm going to ship books from that garage and sell them by selling them online, was a shift change. If he would have stayed employed as a banker, however that position he had before, he would have not achieved the status and the financial capacity as well as the influence he has today. He would have been a greater banker probably, maybe a CEO at some point. But his degree of influence would be much lesser. His level of financial freedom will be much lesser. But because he was willing to dare, imagine, his boss actually told him a very simple thing. When he told his boss he's going to quit his job, he said, what you're doing you're pursuing is very noble. But it's only noble for a person who have no job or income that you have. You have a decent job. You have a potential of being somebody in this company or in this bank. I would not recommend you to go and start a business, especially the business you're going to start. But Jeff Bezos said, I don't want to live a life of regret where I would ask myself, what if I had taken that decision? What if I had acted on that idea? So let me go and exploit. And at least I will close that curiosity. Simple. That was a change of information. He didn't have the information that he wasn't processing. He didn't have the capacity because he was processing information that favored him to where he was. But for him to go to where he needed to go, he needed to change the information he had, and he had to exercise it consistently. Otherwise, he would have quit along the way. Today, before I'm recording this video, I set myself to run. I have a schedule that I have to run every Monday and Thursday, twice a week. But I like to do 3 times a week if I can. But twice a week is my minimum moment. So this morning before I went for a run. Guess what? There were information that tells me the sun is coming out early now. It's getting warmer earlier. My running time, my early morning that I used to run, it was always cool and nice. But now it's a little bit hotter. So as I was going about today, it's a little bit hot. Why don't you just go and do what you need to do at work? At the office. That was the information I was getting in order to convince me not to run. And I was doing it to myself. Nobody was speaking to me. It was a discussion going on in my mind. And when I put my gears and I started running, I had to make myself feel good. I had to make a decision with my idea that I am going to run. I have run a successful run. And I went and I started. And as I was running, my muscles was getting tired because there's a lot of hills in the track that I go. But I like that because it makes me work most part of my body. It's not a flat running. There's a lot of hills. I kept pressing. Halfway, I was like, I'm going to quit this. But I said, nope. You have a mental toughness that is enough to carry you through. So I reaffirmed to myself that I have finished this race. I have run the race and I have finished the race. There's a scripture that says that. I have run the race and I have finished it. I told myself over and over in order to cross that space in my mind where the nerve system, where the neurons that always tells me to quit were more louder. They were more efficient in carrying information than the neurons that were telling me you have the courage, you have the strength, and you have finished this race. So there were 2 types of information that were going on. 2 neurons were fired. What neuron were more efficient in transmitting information was going to be the winner of the day. And guess what? Because I chose to focus, because I can choose to allow the neurons to compete on their own. But in this case, sometimes you have to choose. When you make a decision and stay consistent with that decision, meaning that you say, I am going to see this decision through. You are empowering the neuron that could otherwise be weaker. In my case there, when I kept saying, I have run the race and finished it successfully, I was empowering the neurons that carry information that tells me I can finish it, I can do this. Versus the information that tells me I am tired. My muscles were actually reflecting the tiredness. You feel like your muscles is gonna cramp up. But guess what? When I focused on the ability to finish the race, there was enough oxygen to go and supply those muscles with energy to keep going. At the end of the day, I ran 4.38 miles. Otherwise, I could only run probably 2.3. or 2.15 if you have to half that of it. Because halfway I was quitting. And I was finishing up, it was probably about 1/4 mile left. Everything was tired and it's an uphill battle. I just kept pressing, and at that moment, not only just I kept pressing, I ran even faster and I put a smile on it. Because I kept telling myself, I have finished this, I have conquered it. When I reach at the top, I'm telling you, my whole body was, it was screaming. But I finished the race. You can scream all you want, buddy. I have finished the race as I wanted it to. And by doing that, guess what I've done? I've increased the neurons that always encourage me to finish where I start are becoming more efficient every day. And it will come a time that to accomplish a task, it will be much, much easier. But I have to continuously guard that growth. Because if I do not guard, just like then, when I was able to grow a business from zero, we started that business, me and my wife, 0 cent. Invested effort, time, and energy until it was generating over $1 million in revenue. It took consistent performance. We made a decision, and every decision we made us better or equipped us to make a better decision next time. But when I started entertaining, I forgot to guard. In the scriptures, we're told to guard your mind. Actually, Adam was told to tilt the land. The land is your brain. You have to tilt it. Tilt it with the right information. Feed it with the right information. The Garden of Eden is your mind, your state of mind. You have to work the land. And if you don't, you lose it. Just like then when I lost that business, I didn't lose it because the economy was bad. Because in the midst of that difficult economy or recession of 2008 recession, as they call it, there are people who made a lot of money. Actually, I know people who made a lot of money in real estate. The same real estate that I lost money, they made a lot of money. Investment fund like Blackstone's have increased its values beyond anyone you can imagine because they invested in real estate then when everybody else was losing. So what is the difference? It's a mindset. The type of information the person was willing to decide on in order to equip them for the better, greater success tomorrow. So a poor person and a rich person have the same capacity. But where do they place their attention becomes the thing that they will reap forward. And in the scriptures, the book of Proverbs, we're told, as a man thinketh, so he is. As you think it, my friend, today, you become. Because the type of thoughts you constantly consume are conveyed or transmitted in your brain through what we call neurons, a wire in your brain. And synapses are the connections that takes that information from one neuron to another in order to create an effect in your life. That is the case. So if you start thinking in a direction that does not favor your interest or your goals in life, you're bound to experience failure in that area of life. You might be successful in another because you consume information, you are confident, and you're always firing in neurons efficiently that can carry that information to cause you to act in a manner that progress you forward. But on the other area of life, you might be struggling. But it is all a result of information. The right information will change. If you continuously consume that, will change the capacity, not the capacity is there, will change the efficiency of the neurons that carries that information by improving it. And therefore, that information becomes easily transmittable to your brain. And once it gets to your brain, you will respond to that information in a favorable way, and therefore you will cause yourself to progress forward. And you said, oh no, Alpha, you don't understand circumstance. You don't understand my situations. Say what you say, but the truth remains. I'm not talking about facts. Facts and truth are two different things. Fact is what we see. It is a sunny day here. Indeed, it is sunny. But for me, it is truthful that I can sit here on the sun and enjoy it. Somebody else will say I cannot be in the sun because for whatever reason, they've built information that if they be in the sun, they will suffer a particular condition. You said, oh, no, Alpha, I've experienced it. That's a fact. You have experienced it. It is a fact that one time I could not pay a bill. It is a fact that one time my debt was over my nose. I couldn't even breathe. It was a fact that one time I was in prison. It is a fact. But the truth remains, I am free. The truth remains, even in the time when I couldn't pay my bill, I had the capacity to pay it. It's just that because of the circumstances because of my attention, I attracted circumstances that suffocated me or imprisoned me in a particular area of life. When I acquire new information, my life changed. Today, what you're hearing, and you've heard it over and over, is new information. It's information that the scriptures teaches us. It is information that science is confirming today through scientific evidence. But information itself cannot change you. As Jesus said, unless a kernel of wheat or a seed of wheat is buried in the ground, it will never be fruitful. And you said, what does that have to do? Many people say it's about Jesus' death. He was testifying of his death or speaking of his death. True and not true. Or it's not the whole truth, I would say. But here's the real kick to it. A seed of wheat symbolizes fertility, prosperity, ability to reproduce and be fruitful. That's the symbol of it. Today you have an idea, a desire, an intent to live life more comfortable, more meaningful, more joyful, more fruitful than ever before. Each one of us, no matter where we are. The other day I watched a video of this pastor or a gentleman, he called himself a man of God. He goes around in the villages and he tests people humanity. And in many of these cases, he will meet these people and ask for money or food. And most of them, these are poor people, live with less than $1 a day. Poor, and we're talking about poor poverty, it's too poor poverty. He goes to them and asks for money, asks for food. And some of them will extend it. Some of them will curse him out. But there are those who, even in the midst of their hardship, they welcome him and offer him a meal or money they have. Some of them, they've given him money that's the last money they had. And in return, he rewards them. And you can see the tears in their eyes. The joy, and they thank God. And an old person, a grown-up person will cry and tear up. Because it deeply inside, he or she, despite of the level of poverty, despite of how they are used to that poverty, there is that urge, desire to live life more meaningful every day for themselves and their children. That's our nature-given desire. So that desire, that nature, is what is symbolized as a kernel of wheat, the seed of wheat. It has the potential to prosper you, to move you from where you are to where it signifies. Whether it's financial freedom, success, meaningful life, good health. That desire is the kernel of wheat, the seed itself. But you're told unless it is buried in the ground, it will remain the same. Idea as an idea cannot produce results. It has to be buried in understanding. A soil or a ground symbolizes understanding. It's a place where you put your feet. You can stand solidly, confidently, firm. You cannot stand on water. You cannot stand in the water. Don't go and try it. You'll be drowned if it's a deeper shallow. But we can stand on the ground, which is a symbol of understanding. So unless that idea becomes your understanding, that you are what it is. There's a poem about a butterfly. A butterfly looked at the fire and said how beautiful the colors are. And the butterfly wanted so much to be like the fire. And therefore the butterfly flew to the fire. And as the butterfly flew to the fire, it was burned and completely became the colors of the fire. That is the meaning of death, where you separate an idea as as a potential thing and identify yourself as the person that idea stands for. It's the mystical death. It's not the death of a person dying and whatever the case we do today. But that scriptures symbolizes as mystical death. This understanding that you can take an idea, and if you can stand on it, meaning that you stand in the assumption that you are the idea symbolizes, then you are firing up the neurons that will transmit information about you being that person. And the more of that information is fired up, that neurons becomes more stronger in transmitting that information. And the more it is passing that information, guess what? Your chemical imbalance in your body changes. Your cells changes. Eventually you start thinking as a person who is according to that idea. And if it's a financial freedom, eventually you start thinking and seeing things from the financial freedom point of view. The other day, I was about to go for a run. But the previous night, it was raining. So there was this idea in my mind, because it's a track that I run. And sometimes there's water standing along the way, and it becomes really a little bit cumbersome if you find too many of those water standing along the path. So my mind, or based on a past memory, was telling Alpha, don't go for a run today, because you might find a lot of those potholes and you have to jump and walk around, and when you walk around you can step on the mud and you're going to come home with your dirty shoes. And that is true. It is possible that that could be the case. But was it a truth? No, it wasn't a truth. It's a fact. So I chose not to pay attention to that fact and created my own truth. That, you know what? There's an alternative. What if there's no standing water? That I can run and find myself just fine and enjoy the day. And that's what I did. I went and ran, and guess what? There was no part of water. There was some running water, not a pothole of water. And I was able to run through it without issue. So in each and every argument that is in our mind, we can counter it with an opposite argument. It's just an information. And when you counter it with a negative, with the opposite argument, you're actually firing the neurons of the alternative. And the more you do that, that neurons becomes more efficient in transmitting information. Just like the muscles you use the most becomes more efficient in carrying that task versus the muscle you use the least. So today you have the informations. And that information you are hearing today, that your life can change, and you have a desire to become something. And in this case, I'm talking about financial freedom. You have a desire to be free financially, to be able to meet your obligations the way you want them to meet, to be able to travel around the world in a manner and style the way you would like to be able to stay in hotels, to go in restaurants, to pay for the meal, and enjoy the finest of the world. Be able to have a retirement account. I have a friend of mine who were talking about retirement, and he said, man, he was hoping by the time he hit 50, he would have enough money saved up for retirement or invested for retirement. But he's almost there. So he's thinking about it. But maybe you are thinking about retirement as well, and you want to be able to retire earlier so you can travel the world. You can live life more meaningful. However that financial freedom definition means to you. That is a can of wheat. That's the seed of wheat. It has the potential to prosper you, to take you from where you are to where you need to be. But you have to take that idea and bury it into the understanding. Like the butterfly, you have to burn yourself. You have to separate that idea of as a something that you can be and make it as something that you are. And therefore, by saying that I am that which I wanted to be, guess what? You have buried the kind of wheat, the seed in the soil, in the understanding that you are. And the moment you do so, and you stay in that understanding, when they said, I will stand in the scripture. When you've done all you can, you stand, meaning that you remain in that understanding that you are that which you once dreamed to be. And if you remain to that, that means their neurons that carry information consistent with that becomes more efficient, and more information of that nature will be transmitted to your brain, and eventually it will cause you to behave and act in a manner that will favor you in the direction of your interest. And in due time, you become financially free because you take actions, you see opportunities, and you act with confidence. And out of that confidence, you become more and more progressively in that area, and life changes because you change the information you take or consume frequently. We're living in a world where making money is much easier than it ever been before us. But we have to take in information that allows us or afford us the opportunity to go toward that direction. I hope that this information has been helpful to help you start seeing and looking at life a little bit different than you've ever before. I have to wrap it up because I gotta go back to work. I have some tasks to do, and I just finished up my run, and I feel good now. I've dried. I have to progress with the day. But the bottom line is, you are the next Michelengo. You are the next Van Gogh, actually better than. You are better than Warren Buffett. You are the next and better than Bill Gates and all of these wealth people we have come to know. Whoever is a successful person you admire, the difference between you and that person is not what they have, is not what they have done, is the information they were willing to entertain at some point in their lives, and continuously entertaining that and that information only until they became something. All my life, for quite some time, I didn't want to eat crabs. I didn't want to eat oyster because I was afraid. I didn't want to eat lobster. I was afraid of eating these things because as a child, I saw my neighbor. I don't know what type of fish they ate but the next morning, she came out with a face that is puffed up, deformed, and in those days, we didn't know about using you can just go in and get something a shot or something that will take care. So she went through for almost a week with a deformed face. All kind of things were all over in her face. And when I asked her brother, I said, oh, she ate some fish. But at the time, I was eating regular fish, just regular tilapia and other fishes like that, red snappers and all of them. So I felt like, oh, those fish doesn't cause that type of a problem. I made a conclusion myself because I didn't know the fish that person ate. But I made a conclusion that fish that I've been eating is fine. But any other fish that I haven't yet, I don't want to get that type of a condition. That is a decision I made based on a factual information I saw. It was not a truth to me, but I made it my truth. So for years, I didn't touch. When I was in prison, I asked myself this very simple question. I've been in prison before I came to prison because there are so many things I denied myself. I built a wall of saying, I am not going to partake on this, I'm not going to partake on that. I separated myself from these things. And here I am, separated from the world that I loved. So I decided to be free, even though I was in prison. But I start taking decisions that sets me free. I started eating, the first things I started eating, they had smoked oyster on pack. I started buying and eating them. It was very difficult to begin with. It was challenging. Something want to come out. But I kept reminding myself, it's not the fish, it's not the oyster. It is my thinking. I've ate this oyster and I've enjoyed it. And eventually I started enjoying it. Calamari, I ate those. I ate all kind of seafood. And I've come home, my wife and my kids love lobster. My son always, and my wife sometimes, they hook it up this called seafood boil. You put all kind of fish in there. I mean, it's just an amazing dish. But I was missing in that dish, and I've started eating, and I'm enjoying it every time they make it. Sometimes when whatever the leftover, I just go and make a soup out of it. I create a fish soup out of a seafood boil. That's amazing. I've been denying myself the opportunities and the benefit as well as the joy of enjoying this amazing meal because I created a narrative, a story in my mind. And that story became real because neurons that transmit that information were very, very active in that area. And any decision that was coming in that was challenging me to eat a lobster was not going to go through because the neurons that says no were more efficient than the neurons that says yes in that area of life. But I had to work on it because the muscles of yes were not efficient, but I had to produce the efficiency. We have the capacity to produce the efficiency of our neurons in any area of our interest in life. And today, you are who you are financially, not because of the economy, not because of where you were born, not because of the family you were born into, not because of anything else but self. Shakespeare, as he was writing his play, I don't remember the name of the play. I think I'm not going to misquote myself, but I will quote the statement where the gentleman, I forgot the guy's name again, and I apologize, but he says, the problems are not in our stars, my friend. The problems are within ourselves. And Jesus said, no one can take my life unless I lay it down. A life is not about death. A life is about progress. Financial freedom is a life. And what it says there, no one can take your financial freedom unless you lay down. Just like the can of wheat, you lay down your life when you surrender. When you think you cannot do it. When you think you are not enough. And most of you have been telling yourself this narrative that you are not worthy enough to be wealthy. You cannot be because maybe you were born in this family, because of these situations, because of that. All of that are stories you have told yourself. I am challenging you today. There is a story that you can write. You can rewrite a new story. A story that says that you are financially free. A story that champions your financial freedom. A story that takes you into a wonderful vacation places. A story that gives you an early retirement, that you can travel and enjoy the world. A story that says you can eat the finest food of the world. A story that says that you can travel first class. A story that says you can meet your every obligations. A story that says that welfare and everything else was just a stepping stone, was a resting place. But now you have gone far beyond it and you are living independent of it, where you make decisions of your life. You're not confined by how much money you make and you should live only in this particular neighborhood or that neighborhood. You are living in the finest neighborhood. It's a story. We can write it together. I want to welcome you. If this interests you and you have a burning desire to see that change, I am welcoming you into a challenge that I've put it together. It's a combination. It explores both science and scriptures in terms of this subject of how you can transform yourself from where you are to a complete financial freedom. Financial freedom is a definition that is different for each and every person. But you will learn how to define that. And you will be given the tools and resources that will take you through the process of where you are and bridge you to where you need to go. And this is a challenge. It's a 30-day challenge that I'm welcoming you. I'm challenging you. I'm daring you to come and join me and see that how you can transform your life to financial freedom. You define that. You're going to learn how to define it. But one thing I want to warn is only for the doers, not for the faint of heart. And not for those who are already financially satisfied, because the seats are limited. I cannot do this class and attend to all of them when I just open it to everybody. But if you are that person who you feel like you are financially, you need a little bit of a room, or you need a major room, or you need a complete remake of your financial situation. Financial freedom is a burning desire to you. I welcome you to this class, which is limited. I'm going to first open it up on June 1st. So those who comes in will get benefit from that. I want you to click the link below or up on my profile, and there you'll find a link that will prompt you to that class, and you will be able to take advantage of it and transform your life. But for some of you might slight this information because you're so used to poverty. And the neurons that fires information about poverty are much efficient than the neurons that cause about fulfillment of your desire to be financially free. Some of you are so comfortable with welfare and social services in such a way that you feel like to go out of it is like going to the moon. It's impossible. It is possible, my friend. I came to this country with only $3,000. And I put myself to school. I graduated, did my associate degree with $3,000. I didn't have access to social welfare. And I went and did my bachelor degree. It is on my bachelor degree leg. That's why I took a student loan. But my first 3 years at a community college, I paid for myself. I was able, first, yes, I had a lending place as a helping hand. But it was my thinking that afforded me that benefit. Your social services welfare system, it is a lending hand. It is not a permanent solution. Whatever help you're getting today, don't make your life. Make it a resting spot. If you're driving from one state to another, you don't go to a resting spot and say, oh, I'm going to live here because it's really nice. You're passing by. I guarantee you there's more freedom, there's more joy to financial freedom than being in that system, than being confined in that place. So even for you who feel comfortable where you are, you have a room to change. Just click the link below, up on my profile, and learn more about the class, this challenge, and see if it's for you. And if it is for you, come along. Like I said, the seats are limited and they're filling fast. So go ahead and click, and I hope to be able to connect with you in gaining more information. I call the meeting and greeting session of that before you sign up for it, where you're going to learn more about the class. And above all, hopefully you'll be able to come out of the challenge a more transformed person, a person who have seen their financial freedom at hand. It is said that more than 50% of the world populations are living in poverty. And only 2% of the world population are called upper income earners. Only 2%. The rest are in between here. The reason the rest are in between is because of the information and the habit that they have built over time. And the habit is to consume a particular type of information. And the more of a particular type of information you consume, the more of that nature of the information you will have in your life. Today, it might be your beginning, your new beginning, by decisively making a decision to fire up the neurons that says, yes, you can. The neurons that says it is possible. And not only that, you fire them up, but you act in order to deliver the experience that you want to have. As I always say, until then, I'll be back. But before I go, I always welcome you to share this video with your friends, to like us, to comment, to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, so that whenever we post new videos, you will be informed. But otherwise, comments are welcomed, questions are welcomed, and I'll be more than happy and honored to be able to answer those I can afford to. Adios.